and so I want to set out the action we have already taken and will take to protect them. I'm prioritising energy security, investing in clean, homegrown energy. Our contracts for difference are already protecting consumers, ensuring that generators of low-carbon energy pay money back into the system when the wholesale prices are high, shielding bill payers from fossil fuel price shocks. I can confirm to the House that in the coming days we will publish the government's response to the Finkelton review of nuclear regulation to build nuclear power more quickly. Our energy system is now more secure than it was at the outset of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In 2025, the UK imported 17% less gas than we did in 2021. And while gas generation is estimated to have set the wholesale price of electricity in Britain around 90% of the time in the early 2020s, this has now fallen by around a third. What this means is that we are less reliant on and less exposed to volatile international energy prices than we were at the outset of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and that is welcome. I recognise the role that North Sea oil and gas will play in our economy for years to come. Last week, I met with North Sea industry leaders to discuss their role in jobs, investment and growth, and in energy supply. The Energy Profits Levy currently remains in place, and the Electricity Generator Levy will also be activated if prices remain at high levels. I have set out the details of our successor regime to the Energy Profits Levy, the Oil and Gas Price Mechanism, balancing providing certainty to business with fairly taxing windfall profits from energy companies. I have also taken direct action on energy bills. Our supercharger discount on business electricity is increasing next month, cutting costs for around 500 of the most energy-intensive businesses by an additional £420 million per year. We are supporting the lowest income families by investing £15 billion in our Warm Homes plan to improve the energy efficiency of people's homes and reduce their bills. And through the Warm Homes discounts, taking £150 off bills for 6 million of the lowest income households. That is a doubling of the number of people who will receive the Warm Home discount compared with those plans that the previous government had. That is in addition to the £117 price drop in the price cap that Ofgem have confirmed from next month, thanks to the wider action on bills that I took in the budget. I want to be clear to families at home that despite the movements we have seen in energy prices in the last few days, the price cap for domestic bills for April will not change, giving families immediate certainty on their bills until at least the end of June. However, I recognise that households who use heating oil face unique challenges, and so I have asked the Financial Secretary to the Treasury to lead discussions with officials and with rural and Northern Irish MPs to explore further action that we can take, and those meetings will happen on Wednesday. The current conflict only increases the importance of the action I took at the budget to reduce energy bills. A rapid de-escalation in the Middle East remains the best way to protect us from rising energy bills. But as the situation continues to unfold, my priorities will continue to be helping families with the cost of living and protecting the public finances. I'm also taking action to ensure that people pay the lowest possible price at the pump. In November, I extended the 5p per litre cut in fuel duty for a further 5 months and ensured that fuel duty will not increase in line with inflation this year. Petrol is more than 8p per litre cheaper today than it would have been under the plans that we inherited at the election. And that discount increases to 11p per litre next month once that extension takes effect. The new cheap fuel finder that I confirmed at the budget is currently being delivered, helping consumers find the cheapest price for their fuel. Almost 90% of petrol retailers have already registered for this. And last week, I instructed my officials to accelerate the integration of the cheaper fuel finder with MAP applications. This week, I am meeting with petrol forecourt operators, and I will not hesitate to call out retailers who fail to provide data to the fuel finder. I am clear that the best way to keep prices at the pump low is rapid de-escalation, and I will continue to monitor prices as the situation develops. I have also asked the Competition and Markets Authority to be vigilant across prices, including essentials like road fuel and heating oil. Let me be absolutely clear. I will not tolerate any company exploiting the current crisis to make excess profits at consumers' expense. I am proud to be the Chancellor that is delivering the biggest uplift in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And I am committed to giving our military the resource that they need. That is why I can confirm today that I approved access for the Ministry of Defence to the Special Reserve to deploy additional capabilities in the Middle East, meaning that no net additional costs of these operations will be funded by the MOD, but instead will be funded by the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, we don't yet know how long the conflict will last or what further action will be required. But it is my duty to be responsive in an uncertain world and responsible in the national interest, to protect the public finances and help families with the cost of living. That is what the Prime Minister is doing. That is what I will continue to do. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor Melstride.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Chancellor for advanced sight of her statement and add our firm support for our armed forces. Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Chancellor has made clear, these are very serious and concerning times, and the developments in the Middle East are already having profound consequences for our economy. Oil prices have surged above $100 a barrel for the first time since the 2022 energy crisis. That alone is enough to have huge knock-on effects for households and businesses. Families filling up their car will already have noticed petrol prices increasing. Fixed-price energy tariffs have either been increased or pulled from the market. So we are already seeing British households worse off as a result of this conflict. I'm grateful to the Chancellor for updating the House on the meetings with other G7 finance ministers, and I welcome her commitment to support action to ease pressure on global supply by using strategic oil reserves. That, however, will only go so far. As the Chancellor said, the longer this conflict continues, the more likely it is that we will see a sustained period of higher prices. Of course, that in turn will also have implications for interest rates and for our cost of borrowing. The longer this lasts, the more likely it is that higher inflationary expectations become anchored. If that happens, monetary policy will need to adjust accordingly, which may mean higher mortgages for homeowners who have only just begun to see some relief. And of course, gilt markets have already been responding to these events, which could mean that forecasts we were given just last week from the OBR end up looking very, very different. We must continue to monitor developments closely. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, where we on this side of the House clearly differ with the Right Honourable Lady is in her approach to the economy in the run-up to this crisis. Her gross mismanagement has left us far more vulnerable than would otherwise have been the case. Inflation, to which she refers, was bang on target when we left office. But thanks to the Right Honourable Lady's choices, it rose back up to almost 4% last year, the highest in the G7. And inflation remains elevated. That is far from ideal, given the threat of a significant further spike in energy prices. And of course, extraordinarily, the Chancellor has just now reconfirmed that the government will press ahead with a rise in fuel duty later this year. and borrowing is running higher than was forecast when the government took office. We are spending well over $100 billion a year on debt interest alone. That leaves us far more vulnerable to rising borrowing costs. And the government, of course, is continuing to impose ruinously high taxes on our oil and gas sector and choosing to rely on imports instead of maximising our own domestic energy supply. That is proving to be an incredibly short-sighted approach. But as the Right Honourable Lady has just told us, there will be no change in direction. That is the wrong choice. And more broadly, of course, business confidence has hit record lows and unemployment has risen back to pandemic levels. So our economy is weaker as a direct result of this Chancellor. Now, last week, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the spring statement, the Right Honourable Lady had an opportunity to change course. But instead, we got no action at all. Just breathtaking self-congratulation and denial. She had a vital opportunity to come to this House with a plan to get the economy growing. But she did not do that, not least because this week government have caved into their own backbenchers, who prefer higher welfare spending over fixing our economy. So today, let me reiterate our offer to support the government if, even at this late stage, and particularly given the gravity of the current global outlook, they do the right thing, show some backbone, and come forward with a proper plan to cut welfare spending and strengthen our economy so we can properly support hard-working families through this difficult time. This is the very least that the British people deserve. Finally, Mr. Speaker, could I ask the Right Honourable Lady, will she urgently reconsider her decision to implement the first increase in fuel duty in 15 years? Likewise, to urgently reconsider her decision to continue with the crippling taxes being imposed on North Sea oil and gas producers. On the Fingleton review on nuclear, can she clarify if the government is accepting all those recommendations as ministers previously committed to do? Can she give further details on what additional economic action is under consideration internationally if the conflict continues? What measures is the government considering to support households in the event of a sustained period of higher prices, and what action is being considered as part of the Financial Secretary's work to support those reliant on heating oil? Are the government tracking the Iranian regime's illegal funding sources to ensure UK financial systems are not facilitating funds that are being used to support repression? And can she confirm that there is sufficient resource available in the Special Reserve so that our brave servicemen and women have the support they deserve?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Member for his questions. The government believes that the best way that we can protect families and businesses from this conflict is through de-escalation. And we heard nothing in the Shadow Chancellor's response about what the opposition's view is on de-escalation. We believe that it's important that we get back to the negotiating table and don't escalate this conflict. I'm not that sure that that is the view of the opposition party. But we also know that commitment to greater energy security can help guard against shocks. And after inaction and delay from the Conservatives when they were in government for 14 years, this Labour government is committed to investing and building new nuclear, and that's why we're backing Sizewell C and also small modular reactors, both funded at the spending review, neither funded by the previous government, because this government is backing Britain's energy security. This Labour government is backing the industry of the future, such as carbon capture and storage, funded at the spending review, not funded by the party opposite, because we back Britain's energy security. And through the National Wealth Fund, we are investing in floating offshore wind and in our docks, funded in the spending review, not funded by the party opposite, because we back Britain's energy security. In 14 years, the Tories did nothing. So they failed when we needed new nuclear. They stood by and allowed the loss of gas storage facilities at Rough. They failed to fix the broken planning system to enable us to build renewables. And they had an effective moratorium on onshore wind, which is the cheapest form of energy. We are taking a different approach in the interest of our economy and energy security. On energy bills, I would urge the right honourable gentleman not to scaremonger. The £150 cut to energy bills that I announced in the budget will continue, as confirmed by Ofgem. We removed the failed eco scheme and we removed a number of levies off of bills. On heating oil, those conversations will happen this week and we are working closely with MPs, with colleagues in Northern Ireland to make sure that things are working well. But the Minister at Desnes met with the heating oil sector on Friday and spoke this morning to the Competition and Markets Authority. There is not currently a problem with supply, but where members have individual issues around supply, they should make sure they get in contact with Desnes. On fuel duty would have risen by 8p compared to if I had have used the plans that I inherited. And we've had two budgets, both of which all of the parties opposite voted against, which extended that freeze in fuel duty. So it's a little bit rich now to hear the opposition saying that they want to reduce fuel duty when they vote against budgets that froze it. And on the energy profits levy, I think the right honourable gentleman has a short memory because, of course, he was in the cabinet that introduced the energy profits levy. And they introduced it for a reason, because of the windfall profits that were being made by the energy companies and the need to help consumers with bills, which is exactly what we have done. On the public finances, again, I'm not sure if the right honourable gentleman listened either to my statement last week or my statement today. The deficit has reduced from 5.3% to 4.2% of GDP. It's the first time in 6 years that the budget deficit has been less than 5% of GDP. And in fact, in the 14 years that the Conservatives were in office, borrowing was higher than the G7 average. It is now lower than the G7 average, and it's coming down in every year of this Parliament. And on inflation, I'm not going to take any lessons from the party that took inflation to more than 11%. Under policy supported by the party opposite. And on welfare, I've got to say, for the former Work and Pension Secretary to say that we should be spending less on welfare, when it would have been nice if he'd have done something about it when he was in charge. We are reforming the welfare system that they broke. And on Finkleton, we commissioned the Finkleton review because we are determined to build nuclear power, unlike the party opposite. On oil reserves, we have 90 days' worth of reserves of oil imports, and as confirmed by the G7 today, we will be making further announcements of that. On gas reserves, it was the party opposite that closed the storage facilities at Rough, and National Gas have confirmed today that our gas reserves are at a comparable level to last year and the year before that, and that the numbers being reported are utterly misleading because gas comes from a number of sources. It comes from the interconnectors, it comes from liquid natural gas, and it comes from our storage facilities. So again, I would really rather that the party opposite didn't scaremonger when people want certainty. On money laundering, of course, we have the very strictest rules around money laundering, and on the special reserve for defence, of course, we will make sure that the Ministry of Defence has all the money it needs for providing the support for our armed forces.
Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is right to focus on the cost of living and de-escalation in the Middle East. And I'm pleased to hear her confirm again, as she did in her statement, that there is a money for the Ministry of Defence access to the Special Reserve to deploy additional capabilities to the Middle East. Could she give us a figure or a range for how much money the Treasury is providing to the Ministry of Defence to deploy?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
It wouldn't be right to disclose that sort of information, but as I said, we will provide all the support that is needed for our operations in the Middle East.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Chancellor for advance sight of her statement, but the statement does not include a single concrete announcement and in itself won't provide the reassurance that households and small businesses are looking for as they hear reports of energy bills about to escalate. Last week, the Liberal Democrats asked the Chancellor whether she would consider scrapping the planned 1p increase in fuel duty due in September. Could the Chancellor confirm whether that option is still on the table and that it has not been ruled out? Last autumn, we Liberal Democrats called for a new energy security bank to roll out low-interest loans to households and SMEs. We welcomed the government's Warm Homes plan in January, but can the Chancellor confirm that it could be extended from 5 to 10 years, that it will have a greater emphasis on home insulation, and for small businesses, could their investment in energy-saving measures be excluded from business rates calculations? Madam Deputy Speaker, in the long term, we need energy market reform. Can I urge the Chancellor and her government to intervene to stop these unpredictable fluctuations in the gas market? We need to urgently develop a plan to de-link gas and electricity prices and move expensive old renewable subsidies from the renewables obligation to the much better and cheaper contracts for difference model. I'm glad that the Chancellor has written to the CMA about keeping an eye on petrol pumps, but last autumn I wrote to the Secretary of State for Business and Trade and asked him to instruct the CMA to investigate bad practices in the energy market affecting hospitality businesses and small businesses as well. The Federation of Small Businesses and UK Hospitality have also asked for this investigation. 6 months on, it still has not happened. Can the Chancellor please confirm that she will speak to the Secretary of State for Business and Development? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on rural homes, we know that off-grid homes rely on oil. They are seeing prices going up already as panic buying spreads. I'm grateful that the Chancellor has indicated there will be a meeting on Wednesday. Could the Chancellor also then confirm that there will be an announcement forthcoming by the end of this week? Thank you.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Honourable Lady talks about energy security, but she has never once acknowledged her party's failure when they were in government. In 2010, her party's leader, Nick Clegg, justified opposing new nuclear energy on the grounds that it would take until 2022 to become operational. Well, 2022 has been and gone, but what is here is another example of Britain paying the high price today for the choices of the parties opposite. On the specific questions that the Honourable Lady asks, on energy bills, we announced at the budget £150 off energy bills. That comes in April, and it continues until June by taking the failed eco-levy that the last government presided on over off of bills. And on heating oil, people on heating oil also use electricity in their homes and also benefit from reductions in their energy bill from April. But as I said, the Financial Secretary to the Treasury will be meeting with the relevant MPs this week. On fuel duty, the Honourable Lady walked with her colleagues through the lobbies to oppose the budget measures, which included freezing those fuel duties. So it's a little bit rich of her now to say that she wants us to cut fuel duty. On ensuring that homes are properly insulated, at the spending review last year, I announced £15 billion for the Warm Homes plan focused on lower-income families. On contracts for difference, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right that the contracts for difference are absolutely crucial in weaning ourselves off imported oil and gas, and we are in a better place because of the auctions and the CFDs that we have been doing and the energy infrastructure which we've been building and can build because of the Planning Infrastructure Act, which the parties opposite opposed. And finally, on the Competition and Markets Authority, as I said in my statement, they've got an important role in ensuring that markets are functioning properly on heating oil, on petrol forecourts and for small businesses, and we will make sure that they fulfil that role in making sure that people are not overcharged for the energy that they use.
Bill Esterson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Chancellor's commitment to giving us energy security through reducing our dependence on international fossil fuel markets and moving to clean energy instead. Can I also welcome what she said about her support for jobs and investment in the North Sea, and her commitment especially to protecting consumers through the Warm Homes Discount, the Warm Homes Plan, and indeed the commitment she made in the budget to taking £117 off consumer bills. She quite rightly pointed out the dire record of the parties opposite on new nuclear. 14 years where they failed. So will she give the commitment that this government will add to its already announced successes on Sizewell C and on SMR, and give that certainty of policy to the industry through a fleet approach both to large-scale and to small modular reactors?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. Already we have signed off commitment to both Sizewell C, a publicly funded nuclear power station, and also small modular reactors, which we will build with Rolls-Royce in North Wales. And the purpose of the Finkleton review is that we can build those quickly and cheaply as the current situation more than ever demands.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When I was doing her job, the Treasury rule of thumb was that a 20% increase in energy prices meant 1% more on inflation and 0.5% less on growth. The truth is, it is much too early to know whether she is going to have to find £78 billion to help households with energy bills, as I had to in 2022. But what we do know is that the world is much more dangerous, and there are some big problems in our defence budget. I welcome the fact the government is now committed to increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. But nearly 2 years on from when the previous government made the same commitment, it is clear that that is not enough. So will she unblock the arguments between the Treasury and the MOD and outline a timetable whereby defence spending increases to 3% of GDP and we are able to defend our interests in the Middle East and our allies in Europe, as this whole House would wish?
Chancellor.
Thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. And I think this point about it being too early to tell the impact is really important. Of course, we will take the necessary actions to protect consumers and businesses. But the most important thing we can do at the moment is de-escalate the conflict and work with Lloyd's of London and with countries around the world to get those vessels flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. That is what is absolutely key for containing the rises in energy prices. On defence spending, in his manifesto, they committed to getting to 2.5% by the end of the Parliament. We're going to get to 2.6% by April next year. Then we've made further commitments to 3% and then 3.5%. Obviously, we've got a spending review coming up next year where these decisions will be taken in the round.
I'm only planning to run this statement until 5:45, so members and indeed the Chancellor can all help each other by asking very short questions, please. John Grady.
I'm obliged, Madam Deputy Speaker. The root cause of this issue in Britain is our excessive reliance on gas. That is why consumers in Glasgow East pay much more for the energy. And the Conservatives had an offshore wind auction with no bids. We had an offshore wind moratorium, and the SNP are against any new nuclear power stations. Would my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, agree with me that we must double down on nuclear, onshore and offshore wind to attack the root cause of our energy costs?
Well, we're building new nuclear in England and we're building new nuclear in Wales. We would love to build new nuclear in Scotland, but that will only be possible with a Labour government in Scotland. On renewables, in auction round 7, we had a very successful auction, and auction round 8 will take place later this year. My honourable friend is absolutely right. We need to wean ourselves off imported oil and gas and be more secure with our energy supplies here in the UK.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Chancellor has announced today that she's not really making any changes at this point, and she's calling for a de-escalation. But what would she say to my rural constituent who has heating oil and who has a virtually empty tank after a long winter and now is facing a 100% increase in the cost of that heating oil? I didn't hear anything that would help that particular constituent.
As the former Chancellor says, it is too early to know the impact of this, and the key thing is de-escalation and getting vessels flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. And she would have heard what I said about heating oil, that is uniquely affected. People who use heating oil will get the benefits on their electricity bills, but I would urge her to attend the meeting to put the case of her constituent with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury on Wednesday.
Ben Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Chancellor and also the Treasury officials for working very closely with the Labour Rural Research Group to discuss the issues to do with heating oil troubles that we are facing right now, with prices going over 200% in some parts. Can the Chancellor elaborate more on what action will be taken with the Competition and Market Authority to make sure that we're protecting our consumers from these price gouging effects that are going on?
Chancellor. The point about price gouging is really important, and that is why we have today instructed the Competition and Markets Authority to ensure, whether it is either heating oil or petrol retailers, that they're not taking advantage of this situation to line their own pockets rather than thinking about the consumers who they serve.
Chris Coughlin.
Speaker, the last week has underlined our perilous national security situation and the potential risks to growth. Does the Chancellor agree that now is the time to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP, perhaps funded by borrowing with our European Canadian allies to reassure bond markets, both to drive growth and protect our national security?
Chancellor.
I've got huge respect for the honourable gentleman who's on the Treasury Select Committee, but his party has opposed every increase in taxes that we have brought in to be able to better fund our public services, including higher defence spending. And, you know, like me, he will look at what's happening in financial markets. And I'm not convinced this is the time to unleash more borrowing on markets. That's what Liz Truss tried, and look where it got us.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Chancellor's statement, particularly the focus on energy security and our plan for homegrown clean energy? It has been astonishing since the election to hear that the Conservatives' lessons from the Ukraine crisis was that we needed to be more dependent on international fossil fuels, costing £78 billion, as the former Chancellor just said. The Chancellor mentioned the electricity generator levy. I just wondered if she could tell the House how and when that would be activated.
Chancellor.
Very much thank my honourable friend for his question. The energy profits levy is still in place, and the higher prices go, the more windfall tax is paid. There is also the electricity generators levy, where if electricity prices go up, because they are in some cases outside of contracts for difference linked to gas prices, we will also recoup money there. That is obviously important because if the situation goes badly, we will need to be able to better support consumers. That is why the EPL and the EGL were brought in the first place, and that's why they are important parts of the architecture we have.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
I'm not sure that whether in the middle of the war it achieves much to be overtly party political. I mean, the past is where we were. We're now in the present. So, just to be helpful to the Chancellor, I agree with her on de-escalation as it happens, on defending our interests, not regime change. But the fact is that we have the highest energy costs in Europe. We're now in a crisis, and we're in potentially a war economy. So I saw the Energy Secretary sitting next to her earlier. Whatever the good intentions on net zero, will she listen to the Shadow Chancellor on North Sea oil? Because we are in this crisis now, and we have to meet this crisis with every tool in the toolbox.
Chancellor.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question, and he's absolutely right. The best way to reduce prices for businesses and families in all of our constituencies is to de-escalate and ensure that vessels can get through the Strait of Hormuz, and that is our focus. But what this crisis, as well as Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, shows us is that we have got to win ourselves off oil and gas. We are better placed now than we were when Russia invaded Ukraine because we get more of our electricity electricity through contracts for difference than we did then, and we're less reliant on gas prices to set our overall energy prices. But this shows that we need to do more to invest in both nuclear and in homegrown renewables, so we are not so reliant on imports. But as I said in my statement, I met with the North Sea oil and gas leaders last week to talk about how we can support them during this time to make sure that we have access to the reserves that we need.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Chancellor for her statement? It's vital for residents in Dartford and across the country that they know that the government has their back when it comes to fuel bills going forward. Does the Chancellor agree with me that the economic stability that she set out last week in the spring statement means that the economy and consumers are much less vulnerable to the price shocks coming from the Middle East than they would otherwise be?
We are in a better position than we were when Russia invaded Ukraine for two reasons. First of all, because of our macroeconomic situation. For the first time since 2019, our deficit is below 5% of GDP. It came down by 1 percentage point of GDP just this year, and the OBR forecasts that it falls in every year, which gives us a bit more of a buffer. And of course, I set out how the headroom against the fiscal rules, both the stability rule and the investment rule, had increased at the spring forecast compared to the budget. But the other way in which we are better prepared is that more of our electricity comes from contracts for difference, which are not linked to the volatile and rising gas prices. That means that bills will be less affected. But I'll just come back to the point, it is de-escalation that will have the most impact on my honourable friends' constituents in Dartford and elsewhere in getting their bills down.
Kirsty Blackman.
Families are already struggling with the ongoing cost of living crisis, and the Chancellor has failed to bring down energy bills in the way that was promised in the manifesto. As prices continue to soar and international events cause people real anxiety as they're looking at these situations, they're already struggling, they're already feeling the squeeze in the cost of living as more than they ever have before. Will she now recognise that this is a crisis for families, and will she put in real support to help families through the cost of living crisis?
Chancellor.
I'll just say with respect to the Honourable Lady, on the 1st of April, energy prices will fall by an average of £117 because of the action that I took in the budget. It will be frozen at that point until the end of June. And as the former Chancellor and other members have said, the most important thing we can do now is de-escalate the crisis. But if the Honourable Lady really believes in energy security, she should back Labour's plans to invest in nuclear energy, including the jobs that would create in Scotland.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Chancellor's announcement, reiteration of the extension of the supercharger scheme, but she will know that that only really helps 10% of energy-intensive industry in this country, and in particular those that are electro-intensive. So with the price per firm in gas pretty much double what it was last week, is she able to set out what help might be available for gas-intensive industry and those electro-industries that aren't in the supercharger scheme? And if the de-escalation doesn't come, that we all hope it does, will she agree to meet with those energy-intensive industries to see how those that are impacted by gas prices can get some immediate relief?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and it is a really important point. 500 businesses will benefit from an increased discount through the supercharger, taking that discount from 60% to 90% from April. And next April, the British Industry Competitiveness Scheme comes in, benefiting, I think, around 7,000 businesses. That is set to go from next April, but of course, we will continue to look at how we can support our energy-intensive industries if the current situation continues in the Middle East.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given it was promised at the start of June last year, when will the Chancellor sign off on the Defence Investment Plan?
Chancellor.
Well, thank the honourable gentleman for that question. I have huge respect for him for the time he spent at the Treasury. As the honourable gentleman knows, the previous government committed to get to 2.5% by the end of this Parliament. We're committing to bring that forward, and by April next year, we will be spending 2.6% of GDP. We will set out the Defence Investment Plan based on the strategic defence that we review that we did, and of course the previous government didn't even bother to to do a strategic defence review.
Sam Rushford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've already got constituents in places like Weardale, Teesdale and Gornless Valley who are paying double for their heating oil to what they would have paid a week ago, and some of them simply can't afford to fill up their tanks. Thanks to the fiscal headroom that this Chancellor has created, there is money in the system to support them. Will she look at things like fixed-term payments in the short term, but also in the longer term, perhaps an expansion of the Warm Homes grant to help them to transition to cheaper forms of fuel?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. As I set out in my statement, we put £15 billion into the Warm Homes plan at the spending review last year to better insulate people's homes and help them to move to cheaper forms of energy. But I do recognise the immediate problems around heating oil. That's why I've asked the Competition and Markets Authority to look at price gauging, but also why the Financial Secretary to the Treasury will be meeting with MPs, and I hope that on behalf of his constituents in Bishop Auckland, he will be there next week, on Wednesday.
Sarah Dyke.
Deputy Speaker, since the outbreak of the conflict in the Middle East, heating oil prices have increased by over 100%. It's a harsh reminder that relying on volatile fossil fuel markets leaves households financially vulnerable. Many rural households off the gas grid, like Julian from East Lambrook, aren't protected by the energy price cap. So does she agree that this is unfair on rural communities? And will she take steps to develop a mechanism to protect these householders from damaging global fossil fuel price shocks?
Chancellor.
The first thing I would say to her and also to her constituent and other constituents that almost every house will use electricity for turning on the lights, and they will benefit from some of these changes that come in on the 1st of April. 4% of households in Great Britain rely on heating oil. It's more than 60% in Northern Ireland. We do recognise the unique situation here. The increase in the price in the last few days does not reflect market conditions, which is why we've asked the Competition and Markets Authority to urgently look at extortionate prices and also ensuring that supply remains stable, because there is enough heating oil available, but what we don't want is people to be priced out of it.
Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I welcome the Chancellor's statement and thank her for the work that she's doing to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. Could she say a little bit more about the long-term work she's doing to increase grid capacity and to change the planning system to help invest in new nuclear and in solar?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. We made changes to the National Policy Planning Framework just a few days into this government, and at the end of last year we passed the Planning and Infrastructure Act, which makes it easier to build a whole range of infrastructure, from housing to data centres and, crucially, to energy infrastructure. The Planning and Infrastructure Act was opposed by the parties opposite. They need to explain why they're against building the grid connections that will help us to benefit from cheaper energy.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with the Chancellor that de-escalation is desirable, but the fact is this conflict is likely to go on for many months. And she talks about reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. I can agree with that, but businesses are operating in the here and now. Exactly. And they want some reassurance that the medium-sized business, forget the 500 that are going to benefit from the supercharger. What message can she give to the medium-sized businesses who are very concerned and are currently having to lay off staff?
Chancellor.
I recognise the concerns around businesses, and as well as the supercharger, the BIC scheme is coming in next year, and of course we are monitoring very carefully the situation to see what else might be necessary. But I would say that de-escalation is so important here. There is no reason why this conflict has to go on for months and months. Nobody wants that. It is in no one's interest. We need to quickly get vessels flowing through the Straits of Hormuz. That is why I'm meeting with Lloyd's of London later today to work through what insurance products can be introduced. And it's why on the G7 Finance Ministers call this afternoon, we talked about how we can guarantee the safety of vessels flowing through that strait.
Karen Moon.
Whereas, Madam Deputy Speaker, tens of thousands of homes across Cornwall are still totally reliant on heating oil. So I'm delighted that the Chancellor has confirmed that the Chief Secretary of State's Treasury will be meeting rural MPs who are disproportionately affected by the crisis. But does she agree with me that in order to accelerate away from a fossil-fuelled economy, the British Business Bank, National Wealth Fund and GB Energy need to take a more dynamic attitude to risk when supporting renewable energy projects?
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and can I also thank the rural group of Labour MPs for contacting me over the weekend with their stories and their suggestions, and that is why the Financial Secretary to the Treasury have been meeting with MPs on Wednesday this week. In terms of the National Wealth Fund and the British Business Bank, they are already investing heavily in renewables, and we increased their budget to be able to do so. I also recognise that there are important opportunities in Cornwall, not just the South Crofty tin mine in his constituency, but other energy projects, including geothermal energy. And I've asked the National Wealth Fund to look again at those opportunities.
Robert Jenrick.
The British people are being clobbered. She could have come here today and scrapped her hike in fuel duty. She could have come here today and ended the insanity and got drilling again in the North Sea. Instead, she offered nothing. Absolutely nothing. This crisis deserves a proper response. When will she finally understand that for now at least she is the Chancellor, not just a bystander?
Chancellor.
Cuts in freezing fuel duty, Reform opposed it. The Energy Profits Levy, he introduced it when he was in the Conservative government, so I'll take no lectures for him and the Tory Tribute Act sitting up there.
Torquil Crichton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Chancellor for his statement, for her support for the armed forces and for acknowledging the anxiety of constituents abroad. Closer to home, in fact at home, half of my constituents in the Hill and Near outside the town of Strawley rely on heating oil to heat their homes. They face great uncertainty, no guarantee of delivery, no guarantee of price on delivery. I hear what money-saving expert Martin Lewis hears, fears of price gouging and price rises. So I welcome Treasury talks and I hope that they will lead to further scrutiny and regulation of this unregulated industry. Otherwise, I will have to introduce the Chief Financial Secretary of the Treasury to the old Lewis tradition of cutting peat for winter fuel.
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for his question and recognise that his constituency, more than most, will be affected by worries around delivery and price of heating oil. That's why I've instructed the Competition and Markets Authority to look at price gauging, and it's also why the Financial Secretary to the Treasury will be meeting with my honourable friend and other concerned MPs on Wednesday this week.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I ask the Chancellor, looking forward at the decisions she's making on the strategic reserve being used for defence, will that include the availability for the Royal Navy to prepare warships to go to sea? Clearly, there has been rumour over the last few days that one of the reasons why one of Her Majesty's ships, or His Majesty's ships, sorry, forgive me, is not ready for sea is because the contracts are working 9 to 5. Will she be able to fund this properly so that all ships are available as quickly as possible?
Chancellor.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. I confirm that there are no financial impediments for warships going to the Middle East, and that money through the strategic, the special reserve is absolutely available for personnel and contracts for all of our operations in the Middle East.
Alex Baker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for the home of the British Army, can I thank the Chancellor for her support for our armed forces. My constituency is also home to innovative defence and aerospace businesses, and many are ambitious to expand and play their part in strengthening our national security, but that depends on being able to access the investment they need to scale up. Can the Chancellor reassure these businesses in my constituency that this government will continue to work closely with the financial sector to ensure British defence and advanced manufacturing companies can access the capital they need to invest, grow and create good, skilled jobs here in the UK?
I thank my honourable friend for that question. As my honourable friend knows, we have increased the funding available to both UK Export Finance and the National Wealth Fund to invest and support our defence industry. And also I support the work that my honourable friend and the honourable member for York Outer are doing in ensuring that the financial services sector also lends to defence businesses, including scale-up businesses.
David Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Almost two-thirds of homes across Brecon, Radnor and Cwm Tower are dependent on heating oil, the price of which is now surging thanks to Donald Trump's decision to bomb Iran. Can she reassure my constituents that help will be on the way from the government?
Chancellor.
Thank the honourable gentleman for that question. The meeting with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury will be open to all MPs and is on Wednesday this week, and I very much urge him to attend that meeting. We are aware of the unique situation concerning heating oil. That's why I've instructed the Competition and Markets Authority, but are also keen to hear directly from MPs.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The impacts of this conflict spiralling are serious and will fall upon our constituents' pockets. So I welcome the Chancellor's statement and measures to address these. And yet, last week, the honourable member for Clapton was in the United States attempting to lobby against our national interests, on this occasion with a comical lack of success. So would my right honourable friend agree that the impact of living costs can only be compounded by the continued deeply unpatriotic interventions of the benches opposite?
I thank the honourable and gallant, my honourable and gallant friend for his question, and also for his contributions in the debates last week as well. And my honourable and gallant friend knows how important it is to de-escalate, because it is our armed services personnel who would be the front line of any escalation of the crisis. And de-escalation, of course, is also in the interests of all of our constituents, whether it is on heating oil, the price paid at the pumps, or indeed on their mortgage rates. And that is why this government is putting all of our diplomatic efforts into de-escalating this crisis and reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As heating oil prices go up and petrol prices go up in rural North Dorset, my constituents are hearing the Chancellor echo one of her predecessors, I think, effectively saying, crisis, what crisis? She needs to, I think, actively get a grip on this. Motorists in rural areas use their cars because they have to. The vast majority of them are off-grid. They have no alternative to keep warm other than using heating oil. This is a crisis in costs taking place today, which meetings and letters to the CMA are not going to help or address. Can she confirm? She's mentioned that this meeting has been organised on Wednesday and that invitations have gone out for it. Is it? We don't need the honourable member for Swansea West gesticulating like some string.
Order. The question is far.
Forgive me. Sorry.
Too long. Chancellor.
I've got huge respect for the honourable member, and I thank him for his question. As the former Chancellor of the Exchequer says, it is too early to know what the impact of this crisis is going to be. It's why today I met with G7 Finance Minister colleagues, which I'm sure he welcomes, where we discussed the release of the International Energy Agency strategic oil reserves, for example, because what is needed to contain prices for all of our constituents is to make sure that we have the oil and gas on the market that we need, and that is why we are prioritising those diplomatic routes to de-escalate this crisis.
Jonathan Davis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for his statement, because this is not just a worrying time for our national security but for our economy too. I am pleased to hear about the work that's going on with the Competition and Markets Authority in respect of consumers of heating oil. But perhaps I could suggest to her that she has a conversation with her colleagues in Desnes to expedite the £1 billion worth of community energy investment coming through the local power fund and focus that investment as quickly as possible into rural areas like mine in Derbyshire, because if this is going to be a protracted conflict, that's something that could make a difference.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I put in £1 billion for the Community Investment Fund in local energy schemes in the spending review last year to make sure that communities are more self-reliant for their basic energy needs. That is a lesson from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it is also the lesson of this conflict in the Middle East, that we need to be more resilient, more secure as economy, and that is exactly what we are doing.
Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Iran crisis highlights the urgent need to speed up the UK's energy system transition to clean, green, cheap renewables and energy efficiency. Now, the last time that energy prices went through the roof due to illegal international aggression in 2022, normal people paid the price while huge energy giants raked in billions of pounds in windfall profits. So will the Chancellor guarantee that in responding to this crisis now, she'll do everything possible to protect ordinary households and ensure that no energy company makes profits from this war?
I thank the honourable lady for that question. Well, the reason why we have the Energy Profits Levy and also the Electricity Generators Levy is to ensure just that. But if the honourable lady is really serious about energy security and investing in low-carbon energy, I really don't understand why her party opposes the planning reform so we can build the grid infrastructure and opposes both small modular reactors and also new nuclear in Suffolk. All of those things add to our energy security and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Why do the Greens oppose it?
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I respect the Conservatives opposite, who are calling for de-escalation, but they need to have a word with their leader, who wanted to sign Britain up to a war of choice with changing goals and no clear timescales, thereby contributing to the chaos and the worsening cost of living crisis. The Chancellor has a plan, and we're seeing inflation, interest rates and government borrowing falling as a result. Will she commit to keeping to that plan, to keep bringing down borrowing so that the country can live more within its means and get rid of the awful inheritance left by the Conservatives?
Yeah. Yes, last week's spring forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility showed inflation coming down, borrowing coming down and debt coming down. Our economy is fundamentally strong, but we all need to see a de-escalation of this conflict and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to ensure that our constituents continue to benefit from falling energy bills and falling interest rates, and that is why we're so focused on the diplomatic efforts.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
As the Chancellor has repeatedly said, at the root of the current economic crisis lies the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. So what conversations has the government had with the Trump administration, both about insurance, but more importantly, about deploying UK military assets to secure the reopening of the Straits? And would she agree with me that a more robust approach might reassure our friends and allies in the Gulf, who invest so much in the United Kingdom, and where our presence has been noted in its absence?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. There are two things that are needed to reopen or effectively reopen the Strait. The first is security for vessels passing through it, and that will require a cross-country action involving, of course, the US, but also the UK, France, and we all stand ready to do that, and that was one of the things that we discussed on our G7 Finance Ministers call today. But once that is provided, we also need to make sure that there are appropriate insurance products in place. We're working again with Lloyds and with the US administration. We are the global leader in maritime insurance, and so we've got an important role to play to ensure that those vessels are properly insured once they do start to move again.
Josh Newbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor has taken decisive action to bring down energy bills, but as she noted, those who rely on heating oil are often the most exposed to sudden price shocks. Even in my fairly urban constituency, there are hundreds of households in this position, and some have been in touch with me because the cost of heating oil has doubled in a week due to the effect of the Iran conflict. So as the Chancellor works to shield the British public from the economic fallout, will she make sure households on heating oil are protected from the shocking increases we're currently seeing?
It is important that the players in the heating oil sector behave responsibly and do not seek to profiteer from this current conflict because it is their customers who will lose out, which is why we've instructed the Competition and Markets Authority to guard against that price gouging. I know that he will attend the meeting with the Financial Secretary to the Treasury on Wednesday to make those representations, but the best thing that we can do is to de-escalate and get those vessels flowing to get that oil and gas moving.
Helen Morgan.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. 1 in 3 households in North Shropshire are dependent on heating oil, and I declare an interest because mine is one of them. People have been in contact with me since last week, concerned about the rapid escalation of heating oil costs. I welcome the Chancellor's announcement that she recognises that problem and wants to act on it. Can she outline in more detail what kind of remedy she's envisaging and how soon we might be able to see it put in place?
Chancellor.
I said in my statement that despite what we did in the budget last year to take £150 off domestic energy bills, there is a unique situation with regard to heating oil. That's why I was pleased to receive representations over the weekend on it. The Treasury are working through those proposals, and it's why the Financial Secretary to the Treasury will meet with MPs this week. But the reason why prices are going up is because of the challenges in getting oil and gas out of the Middle East. That's why it's so important to de-escalate, but it is wrong for anyone to profiteer off the back of this crisis.
Luke Charters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my constituents stranded in the Middle East have been left out of pocket because of their travel insurance, and in my view as a former regulator, they have overly broad exclusion terms in those policies. So would my right honourable friend update the House on her meetings with the insurance sector, the FCA and consumer groups, and would she agree for the City Ministers to meet me to discuss this?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question, and I'm sure that the relevant minister, whether that is in the Department for Transport or indeed the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, meets with my honourable friend. It is important that everybody who wants to get home from the Middle East is able to do so. We welcome the work that the airlines are doing to get people home with the support of the government, but it's also important that people are not ripped off for that.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard the Chancellor and others on the government front bench for months now saying that we'll be using oil and gas for years to come, and of course we will. No matter how much they wish that away now, we'll be using oil and gas for years to come. We must secure our supply. In her meeting this morning with G7 Finance Ministers, does any of them say that banning new oil and gas licences from the North Sea is a good idea? Or any of them banning themselves from their own energy resources?
Chancellor.
I thank the honourable lady for that question. It was, of course, her own party that introduced the Energy Profits Levy in the first place, and introduced it for a good reason, because many of the questions today have been about the impact on prices, and of course the way that support was given to consumers during the Russia-Ukraine crisis was through money from the Energy Profits Levy then being used to subsidise people's bills. That's why we have the Energy Profits Levy.
Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Chancellor for her statement today? She is absolutely right to take the action that she has on energy prices, particularly given that 20% of the world's oil is transported via the Straits of Hormuz. However, the Straits of Hormuz also transports over a third of the world's urea, almost half of its sulphur, and a significant amount of ammonia. So can I ask the Chancellor what steps she's taking to protect our farmers from spiking fertiliser prices at the same time as energy prices are rising?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. We're working closely with DBT and DEFRA as well as business to understand the different parts of industry that will be affected by a protracted conflict. But this is just another reason why it is so important to de-escalate. That is exactly what we are seeking to do, and it is also why we are working with G7 allies focused on reopening the Strait of Hormuz, because that's the best thing we can do to bring down prices and ensure supply continues to flow.
Saoirse Eastwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome a statement this afternoon from the Chancellor. As she's already outlined, Northern Ireland is uniquely exposed. Up to 70% of people right across Northern Ireland are reliant on home heating oil. Instead of meeting with me, would you be able to tell me that you have plans to meet with the Minister of Economy in Northern Ireland this week, and indeed my ministerial colleagues in the Northern Ireland Executive, to see how we can best support our people?
Chancellor.
It's really important to understand the extent of the impact on Northern Ireland. When we made this announcement of the budget, we did make money available for Northern Ireland to have their own scheme recognising the slightly different energy market in Northern Ireland. I know that the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, who's leading on this work at the Treasury, is meeting with his opposite numbers in the Northern Ireland Executive to make sure that we understand the challenges there and what we can do to best support.
Tony Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for her statement, which really does underline the importance of new nuclear to boost our energy security. Many of us who back new nuclear also care deeply about nature, and Dungeness in my constituency is both a nationally important habitat site and a vital location for new nuclear. So does the Chancellor agree that we urgently need a reformed framework for habitat protection along the lines proposed by Fingleton Review, so we can safeguard the environment and welcome new nuclear back to places like Dungeness?
I thank my honourable friend for that question and also his pragmatic approach. We will be responding to Fingleton in the next few days and then legislating as quickly as possible to make it cheaper and quicker to build the energy infrastructure that we know we need.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, defence industry supply chains really are desperately in need of the DIP. The Chancellor talks about the money that's being invested, but why is the Treasury not allowing the DIP to go forward? Because it's starting to become really critical and we need that infrastructure. Secretary of State is desperate for that infrastructure. We need to know when's that coming forward. It was the government's self-imposed deadlines, nobody else's.
Well, we published the Strategic Defence Review earlier this year, and in the spending review last year, the biggest uplifts in spending were at the Ministry of Defence and at the Department of Health. The previous government said they were going to get to 2.5% at the end of the next Parliament. We're going to get to it to 2.6% by April next year, and that money is already being spent. He doesn't need to worry about that.
Peggy Shanker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know that my constituents in Derby will be worried about the devastation that they see across the Middle East and will agree that de-escalation must remain a priority. But they're also worried about the impact on their weekly shopping bills, their petrol prices and their energy bills. Will the Chancellor agree with me that stability for our businesses and local people is absolutely vital given the volatility that we're seeing internationally?
Chancellor.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. That's why I'm pleased that since I became Chancellor, the Bank of England have cut interest rates 6 times, why we were able to take £150 off of energy bills and also freeze prescription charges and rail fares. And of course, in my honourable friend's constituency, you have Rolls-Royce, who will benefit both from small modular reactors and also the increased defence spending that is already going in.
Ben Lake.
72% of households in Ceredigion and Preseli do not have a connection to the mains gas grid. And for those who filled their tanks over the weekend, the consequences of the Iran crisis have become very, very real. For those who are still to do so, they're very anxious to learn of when any potential support that might be agreed on Wednesday will be brought forward.
Chancellor.
I recognise that there are significant challenges in some areas of Wales, as indeed there is in Northern Ireland, and I very much encourage the honourable gentleman to attend the meeting with the Financial Secretary to Treasury. We have already had representations over the weekend about what is needed, but I want MPs from all parties to be able to contribute to that. But the best way to reduce prices is getting that oil and gas flowing again, which is why it's so important to have both a military solution to get the Strait of Hormuz open, but also an insurance solution, which is what I'm working very closely on at the moment.
Can I thank the Chancellor for her statement this afternoon, and I'll allow a few moments for the front benches to swap over. I appreciate